Rush Limbaugh is going to do something ridiculous and loathsome, even by his standards. And granted, that's very hard to do. So 9 years after the fact, he's now going to do the worst revisionist history ever and talk about how he thinks the federal government response to Hurricane Katrina was great.
And by the way, folks, there's another thing, and I challenge anybody to independently verify this. The FEMA U.S. government response to Katrina was one of the most massive, one of the fastest, and one of the most effective emergency responses in our history. Go independently verify that if you doubt me. I imagine even some of you in the audience who would call yourselves conservative Republicans say, Rush, be careful that you know that's not true. And you probably think it's not true because you believe it's been stated for so long. It's been the conventional wisdom for so long that the post-Katrina response was a disaster. And it wasn't.
There's a 14% chance that Rush Limbaugh is a long-running social experiment. Because that is such lunacy that not even other Republicans believe it. There's negative 16 people in the country that believe that. Okay? So let me give you some facts on this. 680 people died in Katrina. Now let's pause there. That alone is inexcusable. Remember, Katrina was in 2005. We have all these high-tech, advanced scientific ways of calculating and looking at, the different weather patterns and what's happening, and we knew days in advance that there was going to be a problem. This hurricane is going to hit, and it's going to cause some fucking damage. So what are you supposed to do? Well, way in advance, you have FEMA do their job, and you evacuate people, you make sure you get everybody out of there, and you set up barricades and have food and water in different places and evacuation zones, and they didn't do that. They certainly didn't do it effectively, and they started to do it way too late. 680 people died in the United States of America in the year 2005 because we didn't prepare for a hurricane. Inexcusable. Okay? Then there was a House of Representatives bipartisan, keyword, committee report that found, quote, the Select Committee identified failures at all levels of government that significantly undermined and detracted from the heroic efforts of first responders, private individuals, and organizations, faith-based groups, and others. The Select Committee believes Katrina was primarily a failure of initiative, the failure of local, state, and federal governments to respond more effectively to Katrina, which had been predicted in theory for many years and forecast with startling accuracy for 5 days, demonstrates that whatever improvements have been made to our capacity to respond to natural or man-made disasters 4.5 years after 9/11, we are still not fully prepared. Local first responders were largely overwhelmed and unable to perform their duties, and the National Response Plan did not adequately provide a way for federal assets to quickly supplement, if necessary, supplant first responders. So even the bipartisan report was like, we fucked up. So understand, the articles in the news right after Katrina were heartbreaking. So one of the things they did was, since they didn't have an effective evacuation plan, the sick and the disabled were largely left behind. The elderly too, like old person's homes, people who are largely immobile, they were just left. There's we gotta get out of here, and they ran. It's like a bad horror movie. Like, leave the old people behind to die. That's what actually happened in Katrina. Did you know it took Bush 4 days to send the National Guard in? What the fuck are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Did you not? There was a massive disaster. He's sitting there like, do something, dude. But there's more. There's a bridge to get out of New Orleans that the police blocked. Why? They didn't want the black people, of course, New Orleans majority African American, they didn't want them getting it over the bridge and into the white suburbs. So they were stuck in areas that were underwater, didn't have electricity, food was running out. So when you saw looting on TV, there was a reason for it. They were stuck there. And then, Let me read you one more part here, because this really highlights just how bad the response was. Quote, the immediate response from many nations was to ask to be allowed to send in self-sustaining search and rescue teams to assist evacuating those remaining in the city. The first to respond was Venezuela, offering tons of food, water, and 1 million barrels of extra petroleum. France had a range of aircraft, 2 naval ships, and a hospital ship standing ready in the Caribbean. Russia offered 4 jets with rescuers, equipment, food, and medicine. But their help was first declined before later being accepted, after they realized how bad the situation was and how people were dying and how FEMA was totally unprepared. Venezuela came in to save the day. So for Rush Limbaugh to sit there and say, oh, it was the fastest, best, perfect response in the history of the world, the dude simply doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.